Hey, welcome back to another IC tutorial. If you're trying to tackle some LVT or luxurious vinyl tile or laminate or floating floor for that matter, this video is going to be for you. Let me show you how. So with LVT, this is 100% waterproof. It's vinyl material all the way through. This particular one happens to have the padding on the back, so you can kind of see a piece of it there. Some of this does not, and you have to put down an underlayment separate from the flooring, but it all goes down exactly the same. It's just another step in the process. So one side, this is the tongue. It will clip into the back side of the next piece. So this is called the groove, and this is the tongue. So a few tools that you're going to need to put this flooring in today. Right here we have what we call a tap bar or a flooring bar. It's got a flat edge on this side which hooks over the edge of the flooring, and then you'll use a rubber mallet or lightly tap with a regular hammer on this side, which pulls the floor together. This bar gets used a lot up against the baseboard because you're unable to pull that floor together and lock it in tight. In place of that, I like to use a speed square. For this particular floor, because it's a little bit thinner, the edge likes to break off. And so having this big flat edge versus that one, which is only about 3 inches, it had less chance of breaking the edge of the floor and causing damage. Another thing you're going to need is a tape measure, a rubber mallet, or a hammer. I don't recommend a regular metal hammer just because it's easy to break this flooring. A rubber mallet such as this that has an actual rubber side and then a plastic end, this is the best for LVT. So another thing is a pencil. Always need a pencil for marking or when you go around doors and certain angles. You'll need a razor knife or a utility knife. A miter saw can be used. A table saw could also be used. They aren't necessary for this particular install. It can all be done with a razor knife, but it does make the job a little bit easier. Some other things are some knee pads. Protect your knees. You're going to be up and down on them a lot, and it just makes the end of the day a whole lot easier. So I'm going to show you how to put this floor together. There's a little bit of attention to detail needed. Each side takes a little bit of finesse to get it all locked in tight, and that's what gives you that 100% waterproof durability that the flooring gives you. So for this particular floor, it's not required to have an underlayment on the concrete, but if it did, you would need a piece of black plastic to cover the whole entire floor. A 6 mil thickness is required on some applications, and you'd be able to purchase that with your flooring wherever you go, whichever hardware store you use. So with the black plastic, some manufacturers recommend putting this down underneath as a moisture barrier. Some of this flooring doesn't require it. This one in particular does not. So you just check with your manufacturer recommendations and see if they require a moisture barrier on the concrete before you install your floor. If you're putting it on wood, a moisture barrier is not required at all. Here we are. We've got the butt end of one piece. We've got this row is already finished. Now we're going to take this piece and put it into the next one. On some of this flooring, if you'll look right down here where the two, these are called butt ends, where these two come together. On some flooring, you'll put this side in with this piece touching right here. And then you'll get this piece installed all the way down here, and then you'll tap this joint together. For this particular floor, and that's why you always read your manufacturer installations, this piece, the butt end goes in first, and so we're going to slide this all the way in, and I'm holding this piece up at a slight angle, if you see that, slight angle. We're going to stick that tongue into the groove on this end, making sure that this gap right here is nice and tight. And then we're going to set it down and make sure that we're in line all the way down this seam on this side. Then we're going to lift this floor slightly, and we're going to work this groove, work the tongue right into the groove. And you'll see over here we have a little bit of resistance and it's not wanting to go in. That's where we'll take our floor bar, which I'm using this speed square like I explained earlier. Hold it nice and tight against the flooring. Take your rubber hammer, and we're just going to lightly tap this into place. You might have been able to hear it there. You could hear the hollowness, and then once it made good contact, you could hear the difference in the sound. And now we have a nice tight joint all the way down. Now you'll see on this side it's still lifted up off the ground some. That's because it's not completely tight into there. So we're going to take our floor bar, give it some light taps, and just move our way down. You'll see just real lightly as I'm going down it, it starts to lower down and lay flat. Once you get to about this point where you can comfortably, it's almost touching, I'll take the rubber side of my mallet and I'm going to just kind of lightly hit in a back motion toward me to help just kind of work everything in place. And there we go. Floor is all nice and flat. We're ready for the next piece. All right, so now we're at the end of a run, which means we've run a row all the way across the room. We have this last little bit that needs to be cut. And so I'm gonna explain how to do that, but also when we put this in here, you need to maintain a specific gap. And again, manufacturer recommendations for this flooring is 5/16 of an inch. So we don't want to be less than 1/8. We don't want to be more than 3/8 at absolute maximum. 5/16 is the ideal number if we can hit it every time. So to get that, you don't need a tape measure unless you really just want to measure everything out and get it just right. Here's a quick tip to make this more efficient. We'll take our knife, get that ready. We're going to turn this floor piece around backwards, which I've already got it there. So this is the side that would tuck into here. We're going to set it right against the baseboard. And then right here where this groove is, the edge of this groove is our mark. And so I'm going to come right here. The edge of this piece of flooring, this gray line here, is going to be our mark for this piece when it's pushed tight against the wall. And so we'll take our speed square. We'll line it up right there. Mark it. Now, I would say so that you don't accidentally cut into your floor here, you could move over to another work area onto the concrete or the wood substrate. But for quick demonstrations here, I'm just going to carefully score this with the tip of your knife. You don't have to push too hard. You just need to score that top layer. You could do it 2 or 3 times to make sure that you're all the way through it. And you don't even have to cut all the way from end to end. So then we're going to take this floor. You can see we got this score mark here. Now we're going to take it up onto our leg, put pressure firmly down on both sides, and it snaps off nice and straight. All right, so you saw how easy that was to snap. If you don't get this scored with your razor knife deep enough, it will be difficult. But if you get a nice good score all the way across, scoring it multiple times, it should snap real easy. If you mess up a few, it's okay. Cut another piece. You can use this at the end of the next row, or whatever you cut off can start the next row after that, which I'll show you that here in a minute. But don't be afraid to mess up. It's not the end of the world. If you figured for 5 to 10% extra on your flooring, you're going to have more than enough at the end of this job. So then we're going to take our piece here, just like before. Hold it at a slight angle, get this groove in. Then we're going to slowly set it down, making sure, keeping firm pressure into that groove. Make sure that this side is down flat, ready to go in. Then we're going to lift it up. And instead of using my hammer there, since this was a small piece, I just tapped it in with my hand. Now, something I want to show you that a lot of people miss. Here's an important step. When you get this piece bumped in place, sometimes this piece here will come back out. You can see the gapping there is different. So if you don't fix this, Your next piece is not going to line up when it comes across here, because now this piece is sticking out further than this piece. So to fix that, we're just going to take our tap bar, gently knock that back into place. Now we're all nice and straight. We have good coverage. All of our gaps are tight. We're ready for the next row. So a couple important things to keep in mind. One, you can see here in front of me, the floor has not been cleaned. Did that intentionally so we can show you this next part. With LVT or any kind of laminate flooring, it's very important to not have this. Any kind of a chunk of sheetrock or a rock or a piece of electrical wire or anything that could possibly be on this floor will cause a hump in your finished floor. So it's very important to sweep with a broom and dustpan and then shop vac really good in two directions to make sure you get all the debris up. As we move across this floor, we'll actually take the broom and continue to sweep things away from us just to make sure that we didn't track any dirt or debris in that could end up underneath the floor. The end quality result of how well your floor goes in depends on how well you keep your floors clean, how level they are, and how well you maintain your gaps in your joints. Something to keep in mind is how level your floors are. On concrete substrate, it's very common for the subfloor to go up and down and have high spots and low spots. To fix that, they make self-leveling compound that you mix up just like concrete or sheetrock mud or any kind of mud-based mixture in a bucket, pour it out, and it self-levels itself. Follow the directions on the bag, it's pretty self-explanatory. But the importance of that is to make sure that your pieces of flooring that are matched up aren't going to buckle. And by buckle, what I mean is if they're on an unlevel surface, when you step on the pieces where the joints are, they could begin to crack from excess wear. By having a nice level floor, and you can check that with a long straight board or a 4-foot or 8-foot levels, even better, and just check and see where your high spots and low spots are. And on the box of flooring, it actually tells you what the minimum recommendations are for your dips and your highs. So we're back to laying the floor here. And I wanted to show you, it is possible to work this floor backwards. Generally, you start in a left corner and you work from left to right, just like you read a book. But in some cases, when you work yourself into a room, you have to work the pieces backwards, or even in the direction that you came from. Say you go into a closet and you have to work the floor back to the right. It is possible to be done. It takes a little bit more finesse, but generally the pieces go together exactly the same. You have the tongue and the groove that have to meet. Let's zoom in right here and I'll show you how to do this butt end from the right side. So we'll take our piece, just like we showed you before. We're going to match all this up. This side we have the tongue here, the groove here. We're going to get this piece touching here in the corner, slide it in set at an angle, and then we're going to keep pressure against it and slowly set it down until you hear that lock. So then we have an open gap that's nice and even all the way down. If this gap was opened up in one end or the other, it means that your butt joint didn't go together smooth and you need to readjust. But we have a nice straight line here. So just like before, we're going to lift this up ever so slightly, which is about 1.5 to 2 inches. And then we're going to work this far in. We're going to get it set in the groove and then lift up and just keep working the piece down. And just like before, we have a little resistance here, so I'm just going to bump it. We're locked in, everything's nice. We're just going to work that piece in. This one's giving me a little bit of trouble, so I'm going to get my rubber mallet and my tap bar. All right, so just like before, we're going to set our tap bar, which is our speed square, up against this edge. We're going to hold it all nice and tight. You don't want this sitting out like this at an angle, because if there's any slop in this bar and you go to hit it, most likely you're going to break that edge off. And again, right here, this piece popped out just a little bit in the install process of this one. So I'm going to lightly tap this piece back in. You'll see it drop right down. There we go, working the pieces backwards. All right, just like before on the other end of the run, we're going to turn this piece around backwards. So you'll see on our piece on our flooring that's installed, here is our groove. Our piece that we're working on, here's our tongue. So we're going to push this all the way tight against the wall. We're going to line up. This time, we're going to line up with the finished floor edge. Because this flooring already has about a 1/4 inch of gap that will end up being here because of this groove on this side. So we line up with our finished floor, take out our knife, going to score it a few times. Always being careful that your knife doesn't come off the end and go into your finished floor. Bring it up to our leg, going to put pressure on both sides evenly. Nice snap. Then we turn our piece around and it's going to fit nice and good right in here. So again, holding firmly all the way in. We're going to lower it down. Sometimes a little tap is necessary. Make sure that we're nice and straight here. Lift up. Piece snaps in. Everything stayed pretty nice and tight on this one this time. I'm just going to give it a few little taps with the rubber mallet. Again, going down and back to just help ease that joint together. One thing you never want to do is hit directly where this butt seam is. If you hit right here, if there's any kind of unevenness in the floor or the pieces aren't together quite right, you'll snap that joint and it'll always be unlevel, and every time you walk across it, you could hit your toe on it. So always stay a few inches away from your butt seams when you're tapping on the floor. Another important step to this process is making sure that each row is staggered from the row before it. On the packaging of your flooring, there's usually a recommendation of how far or how not far to overlap your seams. And so what I mean by that is you have the end of your piece that's so far. This flooring is 4'7" inches. The recommended minimum distance of overlap, so from one seam to the next, is actually 6 inches. I don't really care for that look very much. I like an offset random pattern to my flooring. And so what I will do is I'll take the piece that cut off of my last row, the end of it, and that usually starts my next row. Unless, of course, you'll see in this case, we have about 16 inches of overlap on this one. And back in here, I think we went about halfway. And so it's always in odd random links. Now for this case, I do like how this piece is going to overlap here. And so we could take our next piece and it lays in here, and you'll see we've got about 16 inches here. And then on our next row, we might end up with one that breaks about halfway. But always maintaining at a minimum of 6 inches for this flooring. But you'll need to read the recommendations on the box for your particular floor. All it takes is a little bit of patience and some attention to detail, and you can do this all by yourself. So here's a scenario where it defines the quality of your flooring install. You've probably been in a house that's had this issue, and I'm going to show you how to do it, how to not do it, and how to do it right. So here we've made it to a doorway. This is the front door to the house. And most commonly, you'll see this flooring installed, and they always leave a gap right here at this door trim because they're maintaining their spacing. Now we've installed the baseboard and the trim in this house, and so we've left everything intentionally sitting up off the floor high enough for our flooring to slide under. If you don't have baseboards like that, you can take a multi-tool or any kind of a saw or a side saw and cut these door jambs to give you your proper spacing. To do that, you just take a scrap piece of flooring, slide it up to the door, take your multi-tool or your saw or pencil, mark it, and then cut that line underneath this door trim. Then you take your flooring and you'll just slide it all the way up underneath to where you need to be. For us, we're going to slide it all the way to this point here and leave about a 1/16 inch of a gap, and we'll come back, and once we finish this flooring out this way, we'll add some flexible sealant here. So here we are to a corner here coming around a doorway, and I wanted to show you some little tips on how to mark this and get it cut out successfully. So we want our flooring to make it all the way up underneath this door trim here. So I'm going to mark this about 3/8 of an inch back, which is about middle of our 1x door trim here. I'm going to mark that on both sides, and we're roughly 3.5 inches here. So on my square, I'm running my pencil mark to about 3.5. And I'm going to do that same thing on both sides. Okay, so now that we've got our 2 marks for the sides of the door, we need to get marked for this piece coming across the front. So our measurement here, and you could use a tape measure to do this as well, but I've got measurements on my square. So from the face of this piece to about a 1/4 inch back on the trim is roughly 3 inches. So I'll set my square here. I can see my other mark, set my pencil at 3 inches, and just slide that down. And now we've got our cutout to go around this door, and the piece will slide up underneath it with no gaps visible. So to cut this, we're just very carefully going to follow our box here that we've got traced out. So we go nice and slow, getting the blade moving. Trying not to overcut any further than we need to. Come back this way. And you can always go back into it and score it one more time if you're not sure if you got it cut all the way through. Alright, now that we've got that scored, just like before, I'm just going to gently pop it. You can actually see it give. And same thing that going this way. Alright. Now I'm going to come back and go up just ever so slightly. You want to be gentle in this process, especially if you've overcut it at all, because the piece could want to split and break all the way down or all the way out this way. Alright, now we'll just cut that excess padding out of the way there. And line up about midway on our trim on both sides. There it is. Now we'll just get it locked into the other piece and we'll keep on moving. So here's something you might run into. You've got a small little rip, and it might not be the exact same size all the way down because your walls aren't ever a true straight line. So if in that case, we've got some rips from earlier in the project that we're going to use up here on this side. But generally you have a full piece that you'd put in here, and you'd set it up, lined up with this piece that we've already got running down. And then you take another full piece and put it on top, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to set this piece lined up, following this piece underneath it. And then I'm going to take this full piece and put it up against the wall. And then we'll take our pencil and we'll trace this out. Move this down. And now, you can see the pencil line here. This will be our piece that we rip off, and it will fit right in there with just the right gapping. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to cut on the right side of my line just to make sure there's extra material there for our shoe molding or quarter round, whichever you're putting down on top of this. You just take your time, try and cut a straight line. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's going to be hidden. Now something you'll run into here is a lot of times this flooring, when it's a skinny little piece like this, it doesn't want to break. Let's see how this one cooperates. Not too bad. Once you get it to go, it'll start to go all the way down. Alright. Then just like the regular flooring, I'm going to get it up here and get the tongue lined up with the groove. Sometimes it's a little bit of a fight. This is where this little black bar here comes in handy. Gives you a little bit more leverage without damaging anything. You just take it along flat side, push it down along the baseboard, and just pry up a little bit while you push the edge of the flooring down and try and get that lip to lock in place. Sometimes you can also pry it like this. So I just showed you the little rip up against the wall. We've come to the end of that run and we're about to go into a little closet here. Now the bottom of this door didn't get set at the right height due to leveling and whatnot. It's very typical. But what you want to do on these is get you a piece of flooring, set it up against it, and one of two ways. You can use your pencil and mark this across here, and then either a flat edge saw, or what I like to use is a multi-tool. Nice, quick, battery operated and simple. And then I'll just come along and cut that out. A lot of times I'll use a scrap piece of flooring and I'll just leave it there and I'll use it as a guide. But I'll do this all the way around this door, cut it out so the flooring can slide up underneath it. Alright, so we've made it to the end of the room. We're putting in our last few pieces here. And just like we showed you with the rip pieces, this end's got a small rip to it. So I've already laid out the pieces here sitting on top. Push this one here up against the wall as my scribe board. And I'm just going to cut down this edge here, cutting this piece, which then will be the exact size that we need to fit in there. And we'll have this floor all finished up. Perfect. Hopefully this video has made you more confident in doing these types of floors by yourself. If you got any questions or comments, put them down below and we'll respond as quickly as we can. We'll see you guys next time.